Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled "Squatters Build House on My Land, Lose House and All Money They Spent on Building It." Posted by user SCP-682 on our own subreddit r/ripe stories. Permission given to read in a video. I posted about this in r/am_I_the_a_hole, but it was removed because some moderator didn't read it through. Decided there was no interpersonal conflict and then refused to respond when I clearly pointed out what he was missing. Whatever the case, here's my tale of woe. I own a piece of land a little ways out of my town I inherited from my paternal grandfather. It is big and I've not yet decided exactly what I want to do with all of it. I have gotten plenty of offers for it from various parties but have declined them all as it is pretty sentimental. I have had it for a while and people around town know it is mine. I often let friends and family hunt on it or hold gatherings, cut some wood, etc. I have not given anyone permission to build on it though, and like every small town, everyone knows that fact. I was talking with a friend on the phone a while ago, shooting the breeze, talking about various things when offhandedly he says, "So you finally sold off that chunk of land, huh?" I blanked for a moment and laughed, because obviously it was a joke, right? However, it was not. I quickly found out I had fallen victim to some industrious and oddly well-funded squatters. Hoping to claim the land as abandoned, they had built a house with falsified and invalid permits. This is a story in and of itself, on my land without permission. Utilities were in the process of being connected and roads had already been paved connecting the house to the rest of the town. To say I was angry would be an understatement. My family is not known for turning the other cheek and, as some have pointed out, I get a nice feeling of righteous schadenfreude from seeing and participating in the downfall of people who deserve to be punished. Some call it a justice boner. To make an already long story a little shorter, I unleashed my powerhouse family on them. My maternal grandfather is a rather bullish lawyer who likes to go after people just as I do. He was more than happy to assist in reclaiming the land, and of course the squatters squawked in protest as they were removed by law enforcement. Their son then decided it was an excellent idea to appear at my grandfather's law office and spout some threats. This went very poorly for him, especially when he began to get belligerent and destructive. He destroyed one decorative plant and 3 computer monitors before he was taken down by a former Marine in my grandfather's employ. Suffice to say, the squatters have now been removed. They are demanding the land be given to them as they have sunk so much money into it now, but to be perfectly honest, I feel they screwed themselves over by building on land that was not theirs to begin with. I have since been assured that they will have no legal standing to sue for the money they have spent, and I will be looking into trying to keep the house despite it being built with false permits. As to the fate of the moron who gave them those permits, he has lost his job and is under investigation as he is connected to the squatter clan. As of this morning though, I came out to find my car covered in at least 200 eggs with the empty cartons laid out on my lawn. Thankfully, it is a beater that I use for dirty jobs, and the car I actually take care of was in the garage. It was the matriarch of the squatter clan, so as far as my camera saw, there is some more trouble coming their way. I would be glad to post updates as they develop. And of course, Ripe Stars, if there are any further updates, I will read them in a future video. And thank you so much to user SCP-682 for posting this interesting story. And once again, if you have an interesting story to share of your own, then please head over to r/ripe stories on Reddit, where you can share your own story and there is a good chance that I might read it in a video. The next one is titled, "We staged a coup to get rid of the greedy HOA management after they neglected the neighborhood." There really is nothing like a couple of neighbors coming together for the betterment of the neighborhood. Also, there is nothing like a crappy HOA president getting kicked out and moving away because of the shame he feels. You see, my neighborhood had an HOA, and surprisingly, the HOA was not always that bad nor hard to deal with. As a matter of fact, our HOA only became a pain in the butt when a new president took over. We did not know much about the new president from the start, but just a couple months down the line, we started noticing problems. The neighborhood started looking so bad, I would almost prefer one of those HOAs that fine you for grass being tall. You see, just a couple of months after this new president took over, common areas in the neighborhood began to go unmanaged. Now, I know an unmowed lawn and overgrown flower bushes may not be the biggest thing to worry about, but I did enjoy how nice the neighborhood looked like. As a matter of fact, it was one of my favorite reasons for living there. It used to be so beautiful. Other things in the neighborhood started quickly deteriorating as well over the course of several months. The neighborhood was just starting to look unkempt and dull. It was losing its shine. Well, my neighbor and I had planned to bring this up at the next meeting. I am sure other people wanted to bring it up as well. However, right before the meeting, the board announced that all 1,100 plus HOA members would be paying annual fees that were raised 51% from the previous fee. This was just absurd. Why should we be paying all this money when the HOA was neglecting the neighborhood? Well, one of the neighborhoods did some snooping around and investigating, and they were able to find out that the HOA reserves account, you know, the one that pays for stuff around the neighborhood from the fees and whatnot that we pay, was completely depleted of funds. From what we know, the account usually had 100,000 to 150,000 in it. So where in the hell did all this money go? Not only that, after hearing about this, a couple of other neighbors did some of their own investigations, and they were about to find out that there was another account which was supposed to have an additional 90 to 100k in it that was also depleted. The money from this account came from a cell phone tower company that the neighborhood leased some space to. Word started circulating around the neighborhood, and we all decided to come together in order to push the board president out. We also had planned to nominate my neighbor, who found out about the original empty account for the position of the new board president. Well, the day of the meeting came and hundreds of HOA members were crammed into that meeting room. There were even people lined up and gathering outside. Inside the meeting room, people were constantly questioning where the money was, and my neighbor had even obtained documents that proved there should have been a lot more than what was in the accounts. Not only did the HOA president hardly speak, but several of the board members just beat around the bush and did not answer any questions directly. What was supposed to be a productive meeting led to many of us feeling irritated and frustrated. If the neighborhood was being maintained, then I assume most of us would not have an issue with the accounts being low in funds. But it was obvious there was some sort of greed happening here, and we were not okay with that. So, a bunch of the neighbors got together and decided to take actions ourselves. One of the neighbors had some connections and knew a fairly good lawyer. We figured we would stage a coup in order to recall the HOA president and the board. However, we figured without legal help this would fail for many reasons. So, with the help of a lawyer, we were able to stage an official coup to recall the HOA board members. Our lawyers had sent an appeal to the Department of Business and Professional Regulations, which oversees such disputes and issues within HOAs. This would start an official election for the HOA board members. We were still waiting on a decision when we produced a way to get the word out. We knocked on everyone's doors to let them know what was happening and how they could vote to help. While I was skeptical of doing this at first, it seemed to be working because before you know, we had enough votes and interest to have our first HOA election in years. Prior to this, elections were rare as most board members would voluntarily leave their positions before election times were up. As word got around that we were doing this, several board members actually put in their resignation letter and quit on the spot, leaving the HOA. and the HOA president followed shortly after. We were able to vote in a new HOA president and a new board member as well. So far, everything has been going really well. I am glad we went through the hassle of getting legal help involved. Oh, and the previous HOA president was ordered to pay back funds to the accounts because he had been using it for personal use. And our common areas and neighborhood are starting to look beautiful again. And yeah, ripe stars, this is a pattern I have noticed with many HOA Reddit stories that we have read in the past. It just takes the teamwork of a few people in the neighborhood to fight back against the HOA tyranny. And the next one is titled Revenge on Grandma from Hell. I am Indian, and in my country till a few years ago you could get steel utensils from door-to-door vendors in exchange for clothes. This barter system still exists in villages and some small towns. My grandma, being the insane hoarder that she was, loved getting utensils in this manner. Utensils that no one else was allowed to touch, that she would never use and would only gather dust in her room. Anytime my stepmom or my dad tried to donate our old clothes to charity, she would throw a hissy fit. She would collect all the clothes we weren't going to wear anymore so she could exchange them for pots and pans. At times she would take it a step further and demand clothes that we were still going to wear. She would insist that they don't fit us anymore or some other BS argument to get us to hand them over. Seriously, we had to sometimes fight her to keep our clothes. But she never, I mean never, gave away her own clothes. She only took garments from others, namely me, my dad, my stepmom, and my stepbrother. When I was around 21, I had just lost a lot of weight and needed new clothes. Yes, I lived with my parents. In India, you cannot afford to live independently unless you have a well-paying job, and I was in college at the time. So one day, I went to a local store's clearance sale and bought a bunch of new threads. I left them on my bed and went off to a friend's place. When I returned a few hours later, my new clothes were gone. My dad, stepmom and brother were not home, so I figured out instantly who must have taken them. I confronted the grand monster and asked what she had done with my clothes. She was sitting on her bed admiring her latest haul of pots and pans. Without even looking up, she told me my clothes were ugly and too westernized. And she did the right thing by exchanging them for something useful. And by the way guys, that reminds me, if only I could exchange my girlfriend's handbags for something useful, that would just be amazing. Maybe I can exchange them for some motorcycle tools or something. Anyway, as you can imagine, I lost my temper. I yelled, cursed at her, called her every name in the book, and she had the audacity to actually defend her actions. That evening there was a major showdown in our home. I was still livid and asked my dad exactly how long we were going to put up with her abuse. My stepmother and I don't get along, but when one of us was up against Grand Monster, the other always lent her support. This was no different. My stepmother agreed with me wholeheartedly. My dad told Grand Monster that she was now forbidden from entering my room without my prior permission. She started to fake cry and said we were all being so cruel to her. My dad later came to my room and said he would make it up to me and buy me new clothes. I of course was still livid and I was not about to let that cow have this victory. My grand monster needed sleeping pills to fall asleep. She took them even during the day. And she slept like the dead. A few days later I snuck into her room during her afternoon nap. I opened her utensils trunk, yes, she had a whole trunk full of them, and took out a whole bunch of her beloved pots, glasses, plates, etc. I shut the lid quietly and exited. I went straight to an old age shelter that was nearby. I donated the utensils and earned the joy of giving and the taste of sweet, sweet revenge. I did not tell anyone what I had done and just waited for Grandma to discover her loss, which she did just a few days later. It happened in the evening. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when I heard her ear-piercing wailings about how someone had stolen from her utensils chest. A satisfied smile spread across my face. My dad called me into Grand Monster's room and asked if I knew anything about the missing utensils. I admitted that I had taken and donated them. Grandma looked like her head would explode. I calmly told her I had done the right thing because those utensils were ugly and that the shelter needed them more. And clearly, if she could come into my room and take my things without asking, I could jolly well do the same. I think my dad was upset with me, but really had nothing to say to me. He spent the next hour or so trying to calm his mother down. I slept so well that night. When Grandma died a few years later, the first of her belongings that we got rid of were those damn utensils. And the next one is titled Grandma Revenge 2.0, and it is another story of the Indian author from just now. I literally found out about this yesterday and I am still laughing at my mom's pettiness. My parents have just finished up an incredibly messy divorce due to my dad having several mental illnesses that he refuses to get treated for, including stealing marital money, being emotionally and financially abusive, cheating, and a plethora of other stuff. For as bad as he is, his parents, specifically his mother, are worse. The garbage my paternal grandma has put my mom through could be its own post or its own novel, to be honest, but let me try to provide some context. We are Indian, but my parents immigrated to America after marriage and had my sister and I in the USA. My grandma kicked my mom out of the apartment after mom gave birth to me, threw her passport in her face and told her to GTFO and go back to India since she thinks she is so smart and independent. Grandma now denies it ever happening now. Last year when my grandparents visited, they stole a lot of valuable stuff from the house to make sure it would not go to my mom in the divorce. They also got their green cards so they could officially move here and left behind suitcases full of their clothes. My father and his parents have lived to make my mom miserable for 23 years and she has finally gotten free. Once the house sells, we can officially go no contact with that whole side of the family. However, we cannot do that until the house sells. Now here comes the petty revenge. My mom was cleaning the house for another house showing when she found my grandparents' suitcases full of clothes. She took all of my grandmother's petticoats, used when wearing a sari, and tore them up, and we now use them as bedding for my 2 guinea pigs. Anyone who has had guinea pigs knows that while they are adorable, they are stinky and love to poop and pee wherever they feel like it. I know it is a tiny revenge, but it makes me so happy to know that my piggies are frolicking amongst that witch's torn petticoats, and when she finally comes back here, she won't have anything to wear. And the last one is titled Don't Ruin My Dreams. When I was in nursing school, my dream was to become a nurse anesthetist CRNA. In order to get accepted into anesthesia school, you almost always have to have a couple of years of ICU experience. My first job was in mental health for a year, and then I was fortunate enough to be hired into an ICU. My preceptor was nasty to me, just very condescending, would berate me to the point where other nurses were like, "Maybe you should bring this into one of the rooms," etc. She would send long emails to the nurse manager of everything I was doing wrong, made me feel stupid for asking questions. It was just not a good experience. She was also very arrogant, saying how when she was a new nurse in the ICU, she got taken off of orientation early because she was just so good. She would also brag about her fancy expensive wedding that was going to be featured in a magazine. I just hated her. Her fiancé was a CRNA, and it was also her dream to become an CRNA. She was in the process of applying to schools when she was precepting me and would tell us how her fiancé would help her take the knowledge quizzes that were part of the admissions process at some of the schools. So I left that job after a month or so because I was so stressed and ended up transferring to a different hospital. I harbored deep resentment for this chick and would occasionally Facebook stalk her. I learned she had started CRNA school at a college in Texas. They had uprooted their lives, they were married by this point, and moved from Florida to Texas so she could go to this school. So I sent the school an email explaining how she had cheated on her admissions test and that her husband helped her, and that this type of behavior is contrary to the values held by the school. She got kicked out. Ruin my dream, I will ruin yours. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.